the administrators and school board of Prescott Unified School District for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here with me today. Light off is fine. Yep, I'll run it. Thank you. Thank you, Tech, Mr. Tech. I really appreciate that. We're very lucky to have you here in the district. As you know, I've been the success coach at Prescott High School for the last year and a half, and in that time, I've been able to work with over 250 at-risk students. I see why they come in, I see patterns, and I also get to see trends on what helps them be successful as they exit the program, or what doesn't help them be successful. Today, I'm going to walk you through a few activities and give you a few facts of the things that I have found not only in doing my job, but also with the research that is already out there about one effective tool in general, which is the mindful meditation. My goal always when working with these students is to identify where they're at, find out what they need, and help them transition by giving them new tools to help them regulate their emotions. Students and adults who make unfavorable decisions usually are operating out of their brain stem instead of their frontal lobe. So your brain stem is right here, and your frontal lobe is right here. Our frontal lobe is what it helps us with our executive functioning, decision making, and things like that. So a student or an adult who is technically down here in their brain stem, they are surviving instead of thriving. My goal is always to help them go from survival to a place that they can thrive and make better decisions. The first activity I'm going to do with you today is an activity that I do with all of them to just get us started. I want you to close your eyes, please. This will be a short, mindful meditation called Heart Math. I want you to place your hands on your heart. And I want you to take a deep breath in with your nostrils for at least 4 seconds. Exhale. We're going to do this 3 more times. I want you to breathe in the fact that you are capable, you are loved, and you are safe. And I want you to breathe out your stress and your worry and your doubt. One last big deep breath in through your nostrils. Breath out. Thank you very much. This is a short, small example of the power of breathing. And when we do it through our nostrils, it actually allows us to trigger our memory and our focus even greater than if we do it through our mouth. So today, I'm going to talk to you about what is exactly detention and where did it come from. But how can we take this space that we've created for these students and actually make it more effective than just placing students? So the history of detention is this is the place that we would put unruly kids when they weren't behaving. And in the olden days, it would be like actual punishment, physical punishment, but since we can't do that anymore, now we just send them to the principals. And usually what happens with principals, as you know, administrators, is that you have 2 options. You can either send them back to class, or you can send them home depending on the type of activity, or give them detention, whether that be lunch or after school. Now in your experience, you probably recognize that sometimes this is effective, but most times it's not. And what we found, an educator was interviewed who's been in it for 10 years, she said the same kids just continuously go through this cycle. So what that tells me is they're not learning it. So one thing I want you to recognize is that there can be a different way. So today we're going to talk about the difference between detention and mindfulness. Detention is actually when you're confined, and it's a form of punishment, like I just said. And mindfulness is the quality or state of actually becoming aware of what you did to get there in the first place, which is so helpful because without the bell or the click, sometimes we don't know that we are doing these things, even as speakers. So the same is true for these students in these situations at the academic level. We want to be able to have them achieve a mental state by focusing their awareness on the present moment and asking themselves in that present moment, how can I now shift my behavior and my action so I can get a new result? That is the goal. We want to be able to help them acknowledge and accept and choose differently. Since it's very important and students go to school to learn, I thought it would be interesting to help you recognize what were actually the steps that students take to learn. So some of them you can see. We actually have to relate them to what they already know. They have to have opportunities to practice. One of the reasons here all of us in this room are successful is because we went through lots of training when we were in school, and we were able to understand how to be effective as a teacher or how to be effective as an administrator. Well, when a student is just placed in a room with no direction and no instruction, they are not given opportunities to practice until they're once again in the hall where they get caught again, and then the cycle starts over and over again without any pause for them to try something new in a safe environment. They need to be given feedback. They need to be able to understand the problem in its structure and its content. Why is this happening at school? What is the trigger? And they also need to understand the background knowledge. So supporting data, two things I want you to leave here understanding. So in our brains, I talked about the brainstem and the frontal lobe. The brainstem is where we're in survival. And one of the reasons meditation is so helpful is because it actually gives us mental armor. And so in our amygdala, if I say that correctly, that is where we can take that impulsive control and shrink it. So when we meditate, we actually shrink that piece in our brain, which is what is making us become so impulsive in that moment. And then the other piece that's so powerful to give us attention and focus is the hippocampus. That actually gets larger. So when we can meditate, we are building that bond, it becomes larger. So now we're remembering what the cause and effect was last time. And we're also shrinking the impulse to want to react in the way that we always did. Testimonies, these are just a few. I'm conscious of my time, so I want to be aware. But I just want to say that this has been implemented in over 48 states, 43 countries since 2010. There is a mindful meditation moment room in Baltimore, which many of the articles that I did my research on continue to go back to the school because they've really taken this whole approach and they've incorporated yoga and stretching and really a place where students can go and talk to a counselor when needed, and they can talk about their problem and through their problem to get to a new result. And lastly, our very own Prescott High School, my top 5 improvements that I got when I interviewed these 250 students that I worked with were their grades went up, they were able to manage and release their emotions, they were more confident, they had better coping skills, and they actually wanted to take action. So again, you can see the results, they're just overwhelmingly well. Kids pay attention, they rise in their IQ, there's more self-control. Overall, just taking that moment to breathe. I have to end my presentation here, but I do want you to ask some questions. I have about 3 to 5 minutes for you to ask some questions, and I'll begin that now. Yes?
Jessica, as one that spends considerable time in detention writing, I will not leave my seat, I will not leave my seat. I will not interrupt, How do you get a child, or especially a teenager, to really care about their behavior? Because you see, I'm sure you see, the slouchy boy coming in. I don't care if you're in detention. How do you get that part of the brain motivated to want to care and to improve?
In the slide, and I apologize for the rapid pace that we went over it, but it said that they need to be able to connect it to their daily life. And so one of the first things I always do is I ask students, how are you? What's going on? And I help them relate their current behavior with what's actually really going on in their daily life, and to help them see how new behaviors could give them new results. So I let them become vested in their own experience instead of about making it my problem or your problems. I help them see how this actually affects them and creates a better experience overall. Thank you, great question. Anybody else?
Jessica?
Yes.
Yes, no, these students don't operate in a vacuum. They've got a family, they've got parents, they've got siblings.
Yes.
How do you relate all of this back to what they're living with?
Absolutely. So we talk, basically, I believe full-heartedly in exposure. When somebody can be exposed to a new way, it gives them another opportunity to see that, wow, look, there's another way that we can handle our anger or our frustration, or wow, we can set goals or things like that. So the hope is to expose them when they're in our care for over 8 hours. That's a huge opportunity. But then it also is having those conversations with parents, inviting them to parent meetings in the evening, sending coursework home with them about what we're learning. And there was a really interesting quote. One of the students that, it was in the magazine, Oprah magazine of 2016, she talked about and interviewed a student who actually brought so much of this home to the parents that when the mom came home stressed one day, she said, "Mom, just stop. We can do this new thing that I learned at school. It's a breathing exercise and it'll make our stress go away." So really just allowing the student to be vested first and see the experience firsthand, and then they will ultimately probably want to share that. Yeah, thank you, great. Yes, Doug.
Can you describe the process, Jessica, about, is this a class? What sort of dynamic is
Wonderful
involved?
question. So that would be up to you, the school board and administrators. You guys would get to think about how this could be effectively put into PEUSD currently and what would be most effective. So we could put that in through gym class and start yoga practices and stretches. We could put that in English classes and we could talk about the different ways that we speak. We could put it in biology and talk about just the brain and giving some facts about what actually happens to your brain when you take time to breathe. So I think it really depends on how you guys see this fitting for you and how it will work for our district and our children. Great question, but I think it's we can be very creative with that answer. Any other questions? Yes,
Yeah.
Nathan.
Given that this is such a holistic approach to behavior management, how do you see teachers being involved in this? Because I imagine this isn't something that's supposed to end at the counselor's door, but enter the classroom as well. And so, do you see a role for teachers?
Absolutely. Ideally, I think they're the ones on the forefront. So they hopefully would be able to be given the time to be trained for professional development and given that time and resource so that they can learn the effects and quite possibly start their classroom day with it and do a practice, because not only is it helpful to the students, but it's actually very helpful to them as professionals. And the more centered they can feel, then the more centered the students will feel their presence in that room. Absolutely. So I would 100% want them on my front line. I have time for one more question. Ty.
Being the head of the school board here, and also coming from a worldview where meditation is of the devil, how are you going to get me to be supportive of your proposal?
Absolutely. That's a wonderful question, and I'm glad we can end with that. So historically, meditation has been around for thousands of years, and it's had a lot of attachment with being a religion. And the new studies have come out that it's actually not a religion, it's a skill. It's just another skill and tool that we can help kids de-stress, adults can de-stress. So it really is put more in that context now, instead of thinking that it has to be about practicing a religion, which becomes scary for people that don't believe in it and for school districts. So I'm very well aware of that, and at that point it's really just very concrete and objective. It's a new skill on how to breathe with your body. It becomes very scientific then. Thank you so much for your questions. I just want to end with one last piece. That in the last 2 years, our national record of suspension has gone down 20%. And that is a huge movement in the right direction. And it's because school districts have decided to take creative approaches. So I just want to thank you again for your time. Wish you well.